Hello and welcome back to OC Aviary. This video today is a beginner's guide on keeping and breeding British birds in captivity. So as I just mentioned, this video today is all on a beginner's guide for breeding and keeping British birds in captivity. So my main birds that I keep are British native birds, and they are crossbills, bullfinches, goldfinches, redpolls, siskins, and greenfinches. I've also bred chaffinches this year, and there's a few other species that I've kept. Now these are all British hardbills. I have tried British softbills, that being a pair of black redstarts at the earlier this year, and then also a bearded wheeling, or also known as a bearded tit. However, this video today is just going to be on the hardbills, and I found that the softbills are much harder, which I don't currently have. I also have some canaries. As you can see, there's one here. She is a new colour canary. She is a red-eyed satinet. I also have another pair of red-eyed satinets, as well as Norwich canaries, and in January or February sort of time we will be looking to add some more new colours as feeders, but as well as breeding a good line of mulling birds. So I'm going to take you through today exactly what you need to know for trying to keep and breed British birds and how you can be successful in doing that. So today it actually starts off with a question. Now, what bird do you want to keep? And the reason I ask that is because that is going to depend on the setup. So obviously this video is for British birds and keeping British birds, but there are basically two main categories. The first one being small finches, and the second being large finches, because that will differ the setup quite massively depending on how you want it. Now this bird shed is designed specifically for small finches and canaries. So in here is where I'll breed my my redpolls, my siskins, or at least a few siskins, canaries in the back cages, and then we might look to do a mule and hybrid pair in here as well. So I might do my my siskin cross redpoll hybrid pairing in there this year, or this coming breeding season anyway, as well as the goldfinch mule. So that's the goldfinch with the red-eyed satinet canary, and this is all just for the small finches. However, if you are looking to keep large finches, you're going to need a bit of a different setup that could look something like this, and the basic difference between that is the sizes of the cages and the style of cages. If you're looking at keeping probably the largest British finches, then you're going to need something like this, and these are my flight aviaries, which we'll come to in a little later. So there are three different types of cage that you need to consider, and each has its different pros and cons, and you need to make your decision on what you're going to be going for. Now the first cage we're going to talk about are these. These are UPVC breeding cages. These are designed for the smaller finches, not because of the UPVC, but just because of the size. These are 14-inch cage fronts, and they're about 12 inches high. Depth is about 12 inches as well, and these are going to work really nicely for breeding my redpolls next year. They'll also suit canaries. They might suit siskins that have been cage bred, however I won't be using these for my siskins. They'll also suit mulling pairs, so anything basically to do with a canary, or at least a canary hen. However, I would recommend these for mainly redpolls, canaries, and yeah, potentially siskins, providing you get cage bred pairs. If not, we have these. These are wire breeding cages. These are really just ideal for canaries best. I mean, I actually bred redpolls in these this year. I had a clutch of redpolls. They were fine. It's just that they would generally breed in something that is a bit more private, with just the front out rather than wire sides as well. I also bred a pair of British greenfinches in here. However, I wouldn't recommend it, and the reason being is because it was very hard to keep them fit, considering the size of the bird that I was looking at. And then the other type of breeding cage is a wooden breeding cage. So we're going to come to the pros and cons of each type of cage for you to make your decision. So the pros of having a UPVC cage is because really the main benefit is cleanliness and hygiene. They're very easy to clean. All you have to do is take your cage front out, scrape them down, and then I just get a bottle of disinfectant, a spray bottle of disinfectant. It's actually in my other shed at the moment, and get a flannel, a rag, and just give them a really good rub down, completely disinfected, very easy to do. And then fresh easy bed on the bottom, or newspaper. I usually put a layer of newspaper and then easy bed on the top. It just helps protect the bottom layer. It doesn't matter either way. And that is mainly for harbouring mite, because they don't harbour mite as easily. There isn't as many cracks and crevices for them to hide into. They also don't rot, so you don't have rotting wood, which is obviously moist, and that is where generally you'll find a lot of mite. So UPVC cages are great for that, and they can be built in almost any specific dimension you're after. It's no different than building a wooden cage. However, it all depends on the size of the cage front that you want. However, these are custom made by Dave Rands, and you can also get other types as well. So you can get really much larger ones. I've seen some fantastic examples of cages, UPVC cages that are about this big. So that's about 2.5 feet or 3 feet, and then by about 2.5, 3 feet wide and 18 inches deep. Absolutely fantastic, especially for breeding red poles and even larger finches. So the second type of cage is the wire cages. They're great because they can be very easily cleaned down. However, the main issue you find is draft. Unlike the UPVC cages, you get an awful lot of privacy for the birds where they can only see out the front. The wire cages are open on all sides, so I'd always recommend that at least if you're going to have wire cages, you put them in a corner, which is like that, so that the birds don't have anything to worry about from the back, but they have the front and at least one side, if not both sides, to worry about. If you're breeding canaries, you will know that you need to have a divider down between the cages. So I'll give you an example. If we was to have more wire cages here on this side, I would need to run a strip of wood down the side so that the birds in that cage can't see the birds in the other cage if they're the same species, i.e. if they're canaries. And the reason being is because they want to get to each other, and they might pair through the cage, and then you'll end up with no youngsters from either pair because they'll squat for the other male. You know, there might be the odd case where the male jumps on of the other one, but either way, you don't want them seeing each other. You want them paired to each other who they're sharing the cage with. They're great because they're very easy to clean, so easy to set up, and I think really for canaries they're exactly what I'll be looking to use for next year. That'll be at least with my Norwich and at least a pair of new colours. However, I will also be putting young British in there, which will be my red poles, my siskins, and then probably mules as well, or small miniature hybrids there. The third type of cage is actually one we have here. These are wooden cages. I built these myself, and wooden cages are great for fixing things too. So UPVC, I generally don't want to drill them or anything other than when I've drilled them to connect them onto the wall, and it's just because they're quite expensive, and obviously you can't fill it as well, and you know, it's better like that. With wooden cages you can fill it very easily, as well as when you come to breeding the birds, you can just get a nest pan, a screw and a drill, just screw it on and you're sorted. Very easy to use. However, the main issue with wooden cages is they harbour mite, because in all the cracks and crevices the mite can get and hide. Obviously, if the wood is wet and gets moist, it's going to rot, and that's exactly where you'll find the mite. So that is the one downside I would say to wooden cages. Also, UPVC are lighter, so you don't need as thick or as strong a walls on your bird shed. However, I would always recommend you get the strongest possible, because you never know what you're going to have to hang off that in time to come. These are freestanding, so this is actually a freestanding block of 4 wooden cages. Each cage is a length of just about 3 feet. They're about 18 inches, or maybe, I don't know, a little bit smaller, maybe 14 to 16 inches deep in height, and then depth back they're about 11 or 12 inches back. They work really nicely, and this is where I've got my mule and hybrids pairs in at the moment, as they're bonding. It's helping the cockbird keep fit, keep them active, and give them room should they need it in case they're squabbling, but it also means that they aren't completely hiding away from each other. Next year in these, I'll be looking to breed probably 2 pairs of red poles, so probably the best pairs, the best hens and the best cocks in there. For the two lower cages, I'll probably leave the lowest cage empty for the youngsters, and then the third cage will probably be looking to do the red pole siskin in there, because I don't want the red pole or the siskin seeing others. So all it can see out of is the wall, which faces here, and the entry or exit door. So pros and cons to wooden is mite harbouring, but not as easy to clean, and also very easy to fix things too. UPVC, they're lightweight, they're very easy to clean. However, I don't really like to go screwing things to them, and they're also very expensive. So get those if you can afford them. I would 100% recommend them. And for wire cages, they're really good for cleaning. However, really, you know, there's not as much my issues with them. But what you will find is that the birds aren't as settled in them because there's more than just the front to look out for potential predators. Now this here is one of my flights. As you can see, it is dark. I'm actually recording this video at 4:30 in an afternoon, and because it's December, it is very dark, and I apologise for the quality of the camera right now. It's because it's dark and the light. Anyway, so this is where I'll be looking to breed some of the largest finches. So in here I'll be doing my Siberian bullfinches. I'll have other flights as well. In there will be the crossbills. I'll also do a pair of green finches out there. At the moment in here we just have canary cocks and mule cocks, really just to keep them fit and just give them the room, because the mule cocks are obviously infertile. We won't be breeding from them next year. At most they'll get to be used as a feeder. The canary cocks, however, will be being bred, and that's 2 Norwich at the moment and a satinet wherever he's gone. He's back there. So this is one of the flights. I would recommend that with flights, at least you make sure that you have very easy access for feeding. So my entrance door also has the food and water on there. As you can see, there's actually a canary sat in that pot there, and that just, I open the door, fill that up, so I don't even have to come into the flight, except for when I'm having to check nests and bring chicks. Out the front we have the mesh. It's currently all wrapped in plastic because it's winter. It's just draft proofing, as birds don't like draft. But however, the temperature in here is fine, more than fine for British birds and obviously canaries and the mule cocks. So I look to plant this really and make it more suited to breeding in about February time, once I've got access to some a fair bit of vegetation. I generally use real Christmas tree that has been used at Christmas, and I just take those in, a few of them at least, cut the branches off, and then I'll cover the whole back in that and a bit of the roof, and it's just going to add a much better environment. And yeah, so British finches do need cover in there or around their nest sites. That is a general rule. You will find exceptions where, especially with a lot of red poles, they've been quite heavily domesticated, especially with all the different mutations, to the point where they really don't need as much, or if any. But I would always recommend you put some. You can use fake Christmas tree, real Christmas tree, or any other evergreen plant that isn't poisonous, and that works quite well, I find anyway. I will be using different styles of nest site this year, so I'll be using nest pans, I'll be using chapel styles, and I will be using external nest boxes. That will only be attached to the cages, the external nest boxes, but also in here I'll fix them to the back, put fake Christmas tree around them, and just had a really secluded and secretive place for the birds to nest. I would also always recommend that whatever you get for flights and cages, you should always go bigger. Bigger is better, and the reason being is because of fitness mainly. So these are 5 feet or nearly 6 feet long, these UPVC cages, and I can put dividers in and it works really quite nicely. And the reason being that I have them as large as possible is because, especially in winter like now, we have the cockbirds in there, the hens in there. For the red poles, we have all the siskins in there, and then we have the mule pairs there. It's going to help keep them fit, and then when we come to condition them, there won't be any issues with fitness, especially when I find that Norwich canaries in particular aren't as easy to get fit. They really are quite lazy and heavy birds. I'll just show you an example now of a Norwich. This isn't a high quality Norwich, it's a yellow bird, but as you can see, a rather large amount of feather on that. That's a cockbird who's paired to a greenfinch hen, and yeah, that they aren't as easy to get fit. However, when I have them in these sort of largest cages, then you get a much better result. The cockbird's always fine, it's getting fit, and it's really just ideal and works quite nicely. So I'd always recommend that you get the biggest cages because of conditioning, but also as soon as it comes breeding season, you want to make sure that those birds are comfortable, as well as the cockbirds are keeping fit throughout the breeding season, which is very important. So this is going to work nicely. I can have a perch at either end. The cockbird's going to be going back and forth, keeping himself fit, because the last thing you need is a fat cockbird who just won't be won't be filling eggs for you, and that's just a waste of space. And obviously it's quite annoying as well, because you'll find that if he's come into condition and then he's dropped out of condition because he's not fit enough, you'll get him into condition again by the end of the breeding season, so you might as well leave it. Or at least you'll find that in most cases. There are exceptions, but really you want to keep them as fit as possible throughout the breeding season, no exceptions to that. Also, just as I mentioned with the flights, I would always recommend making 3 solid walls and then an area of solid roof so that there's no sunlight can come through, and that just protects the birds from any sunlight on the nests. And then an area where sunlight and weather can come through, because the birds enjoy that. And then you generally a mesh front, so that the birds have that, like all the air coming through, like fresh air, the heat obviously in the summer. And it's just really important that you do that, and I find that definitely works nicely when breeding the birds. This year in the flights, we didn't have the largest flight, which I showed you. The whole thing this breeding season was actually in Aviary. This was my exotics aviary before I got rid of all my exotic finches. We didn't have a window there. We had just a flap, and that allowed the birds. It was about 8 by 10. It originally started off by 10 by 14. This is 10 feet, and then actually it's 14 feet wide, but we have flights covering that now. But in the other flights, I bred a few crossbills this year. I got them in quite late though, so we didn't get as good of a breeding season as we could have got out of them. I believe from one pair of green finches I bred about 15 youngsters. However, we only ended up with 6 in the end, because quite a few of them went white due to coxy, and just a lack of vitamins are very difficult green finches to get to the adult stage. We also bred a few siskins as well, and we bred a few Siberian bullfinches. The flights are 8 feet long, 6 feet high and 2 feet wide, or sorry, 2.5 feet wide. The one I showed you guys was actually 4 feet wide. That's for my largest. When I do get hawfinches in a few years time, that's where they'll be going. But at the moment, for next year, we'll be having Siberian bullfinches in there and a trio of Siberian goldfinches. So I won't be going to the diet too much, because I've made a video previously on the diet. However, if you do want to see that and understand the diet of the birds, there's a link right here. Just press that, but I'd always recommend that you come to this after the video, so you can understand exactly, you know everything I'm going to say in this video. Then you can go to that video and you can watch that and understand the diet better. However, with the small finches, I'm looking at generally smaller seeds. So you're looking at canary seed, rape seed, linseed, Niger seed, and smaller, finer seeds. Whereas with the larger finches, we were looking at a bit of sunflower in there as well. We have all that mix, but also much larger seeds, because they generally would benefit from them more. And then if you're looking at crossbills, then you want to be even adding more, so dried fruits in that, almost like a parrot mix for crossbills. But if you can get a specific dedicated mix for them, that's even better. So a crossbill mix for them, a red poll mix for the red polls, and everything else. So look at different seed mixes. You have options too. I actually just buy a home brand from a local feed distributor. However, this year I reckon I will be looking to buy specific mixes, or at least to cover the large finches and the small finches. I make my own crossbill mix, which I will show you, which I've showed you in the seed video, and also the breeding crossbills video. But for next year, I'll probably look to get something like even just a red poll mix for all the red polls, the goldfinches, the siskins, and the canaries, and then for the green finches, the crossbills, the bullfinches, and also the yellow hammers. Then I'll be looking at probably a green finch mix, because it would generally suit more of them and gives them better options. Also, when it comes to the health of your birds, I'd always recommend that you give them many different supplements, because you want to be replicating nature as much as possible, as well as frequent baths. Now, I use different supplements, and I will be actually promoting and selling a new type of supplement to the UK within probably the next month or so, so make sure you stay tuned for that in a future video. However, you want to make sure that you get a general sort of multivitamin. That's going to be very important in the molt, and also when you condition the birds. I also give a fertility vitamin. Now this is Versalaga Fertivit. That works really nicely for conditioning the birds. It's essential vitamins for fertility. and I'll be giving that in the breeding season and in the conditioning sort of time. That's going to help massively. Something I didn't know, and this mainly applies to greenfinches, however I did also have the experience with bullfinches, is coccidiosis. You need to be aware of it. So I use currently Baycox. This is from Merca Systems in Portugal. It's about that's about £28, and that works quite nicely. It's just a coccidiosis preventative. For greenfinches, I give 2 to 3 ml per litre of drinking water. For bullfinches and pretty much everything else, I generally try and use it once a month for everything. And that I use that at 1 ml per litre for everything else other than the greenfinches, which are generally quite prone to it. You also will need some sort of like dewormer. So you can use apple cider vinegar. However, another option which I use is avian herb and liquid. That is just an oregano extract. It's really quite good. If you haven't already watched the medications video on all of the medication that I give to the birds, it'll help you understand it better and go into more detail, because this is a general beginner's guide. Other things you should be aware of are other more common diseases and issues when keeping not only just British finches but birds in general. So one being scaly leg, or like a leg mite. So I would recommend, I mean, I actually use Vaseline on the legs. That tends to work quite well because it suffocates the mite in the legs. However, I believe it's Johnson's offer a really good scaly leg like formula, and you just drip that on the leg, and it really helps and kills the mite. There's a few other bits as well. Blue moor, for example, it's actually a natural sedative, so I use that around the new year and bonfire night, and that's just because it helps relax the birds, so when they do hear a firework they aren't as startled by it. I also use it for ill birds, as sometimes you end up with birds that really aren't well, and I've found that blue moor works really nice as a pick-me-up for them. So then as we come to sort of species, and if you're starting out with British birds, what should you go for? Now, if you wanted to go large finches, I'd say greenfinches every time. They can breed in relatively smaller cages. I mean, at the moment, I have all my greenfinch hens, they're in a 4-foot breeding cage. And the cockbirds, I only have 2 cockbirds at the moment. They're in there. It's a silver split pied in there and a normal split agate in there. I do need to be getting some new blooded and some much better quality greenfinch cocks. These are okay. I will be keeping the silver split pied to go to my pied hen, as we'll get visual pieds, cocks and hens from that pair, as well as agates, which will be quite nice because it'll all be mutations. But I do need some good normal cocks in for the normal hens I have. So that's for large finches. They're generally a very good starter, very easy to breed and understand. As for small finches, I would say red polls every time. Very simple, very easy. This cage here is actually a 2-foot breeding cage. It's 18 inches high and 12 inches back. I bred, over the past 2 years, that particular cage has produced me probably the best, up to 20 birds alone, and that's from 2 different pairs though, but that cage worked really nicely for me. However, I obviously now have a dedicated small finch shed designed just for red polls. So I'd probably say that if you're going to breed greenfinches, the smallest cage you want to breed them in is a 3-foot breeder. The smallest for red polls is a 2-foot breeder. I did try them in single breeding cages this year, red polls in that. It worked, they went down, but the eggs weren't fertile, the cockbird wasn't getting fit enough. So we resolved that by moving them into much larger cages. But either way, that's for a different video. And we'll see more breeding guides in the breeding season. So red polls would generally be that. As a colour to go for red polls, I'd say keep cheap for your first year at least, so you can understand the birds and learn, sort of learn how to breed them. As it would be better that you maybe go and buy a pair of normals for £50 rather than a pair of pieds for £200, because if you lose the pieds, you don't breed off them, it's quite It's very annoying, especially when you invest the money in them and you don't get the result. So I'd always recommend learn first on the cheaper ones and then get more expensive. Same for greenfinches. You can generally pick up a pair of greenfinches at an auction for about £25 a pair. They aren't any good for show quality, so that's something else we need to mention as well. But at least for learning, I would recommend go to an auction, try and pick up a pair of greenfinches. Make sure the close rung. It's very important that any British birds you buy are close rung. I use BBC rings, however you can also use IOA, or as pretty much as long as the bird has a split ring on, a closed ring, an absolute closed ring, not split rings. It has a metal closed ring on. It's the correct size. So for greenfinches it's E, for redpolls it's B, goldfinches are C's, chaffinches are C's, bullfinches are D's if they're native bullfinches, Siberians are E's or E+, yellow hammers are E+ rings, crossbills are J rings. That's pretty much all of them covered. Siskins are B rings, mealy redpolls are C's, I believe. You can get B's or C's on mealy redpolls. Hawfinches are J rings, I believe. Same as crossbills, they might be a size up. But either way, if you're a novice or you're just starting out with beginners finches, then avoid pretty much everything that's difficult. Stick to greenfinches, redpolls and siskins at least for your first year. I made the mistake of when I started out with a pair of greenfinches which were fine, other than they produced me 7 rounds of clear eggs. I started out with a pair of native bullfinches. They were a nightmare because they were so quite skittish and I didn't have the flights at that point. And I also started with a pair of yellow hammers, not the pair you see behind me, a different pair. And I sadly got caught out with a wild caught pair. I made the mistake and didn't realise until after getting them home that they were, so I had to deal with them from there. So I would just recommend stick to greenfinches, redpolls, siskins for the starters. You'll find a much better result and you can learn with them better. Something to mention with siskins, if you do decide to start with them, is make sure that you remove the cockbird after the hens laid the eggs, because a cockbird will destroy eggs if not kill chicks generally. I had that this year where I lost a clutch of young siskins because the father killed them when they were a day old. The previous year I actually had 3 clutches of siskin eggs, all which were thrown by the cockbird, which was not a good cockbird, which was a bugger. But that's generally that. So just make sure that you start out with something easy and make sure you have a setup design for them. If you want to email me or contact me, you can contact me on Instagram at OC_Aviary. You can contact me on Facebook at OC_Aviary, or the actual username is at OC_Aviary YouTube. And then if you want to email me, then contact me at oc.aviary@gmail.com, and I'm more than happy to go into detail and answer any questions. There are quite a few different breeding guides on the channel, so go to the channel down below, press videos and have a look through the videos. There are breeding guides on pretty much everything that I have to date. There isn't anything on the yellow hammers. Crossbills there isn't much on because I didn't do an awful lot. There's nothing on goldfinches because I only got those this year as well. There is a general on mules and hybrids. I haven't done one on canaries, but I will be doing this year, and I'll also be doing updated and much better breeding guides on everything next year. So that's pretty much it for this video. Just a beginner's guide. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions and help you out. I started with British a few years ago. I started out with cage birds in general 7 years ago, with exotic finches and other things like that. So I'm relatively well experienced with just keeping cage birds, and I do an awful lot of research to make sure that I'm continually improving my methods and making it even better for the birds. So I'm more than happy to help. There's also a lot of breeders I'm sure will be more than happy to help and give advice out. So join different pages on Facebook and groups. The link to the group that I help manage is the Natives in Norwich group on Facebook. There are so many other groups as well. Join some local groups and local cage bird societies, and they'll help you massively. So that brings us to the end of this week's video. I wanted to keep it a short and short and concise video for everyone who's looking to start out with British finches. I will definitely do a better and a more updated version. However, there's an awful lot of videos on my channel which explain everything in detail, and especially come breeding season we'll make a much better guide to breeding them, as obviously I can't show you anything now because it's the middle of winter, nothing is breeding, and we're just starting to condition the crossbills and the greenfinch crossbill pair, as you saw in the previous video. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and you get to follow on all of my content and enjoy more of my videos. Hit the notification button, as that will notify you every single time I upload, so you don't miss any of my future videos. Hit the like, and that shows me that you're enjoying these videos. Make sure you share the video with someone else who's looking to start out with British finches, or someone else who would enjoy watching these videos. And I will see you in the next video. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.